Hi, friends and future authors. This is Lynn Smargis back for another episode of Publishing for Professionals, where today we have an awesome guest expert on. I refer him out all the time. And before we jump into our guest expert episode today, I'm going to have a big welcome back to my returning listeners. Thanks again for joining me for another episode of Publishing for Professionals, and welcome to my new listeners. I'm so glad you stopped by to check out my podcast. Please make sure to hit the follow button wherever you're at, if that's an audio player, or hit the subscribe button if you're watching Publishing for Professionals on YouTube. So every week you can get it straight dropped into your player. Today, I have an incredible conversation lined up for you. I have Gordon Firemark with me today, and he is an intellectual property, entertainment, and media lawyer from LA, where he helps all sorts of creators across media protect their work, their businesses, their families with smart legal strategies. He is a producer and host of two podcasts, Entertainment Law Update, which is a monthly legal news roundup for entertainment industry professionals, and Legit Podcast Pro, which features weekly legal strategy tips for the creator economy. He's also an entrepreneur, educator, and occasional theater producer, and you can also check him out on Substack, where I follow him there. Gordon, welcome to Publishing for Professionals.
Well, hi, Liquidity. It's great to see you.
It's awesome to see you on my podcast because we've seen each other at so many other places,
Yeah.
and finally get to have you on. So today we're going to be talking about a super hot topic in the publishing industry, because I know I've seen this as a ghostwriter and a book editor, that a lot of editors now will refuse to edit AI material, like anything that is someone has used AI to write their book. So today I would love to talk to you about where do you get in the legal fire when writing your book with AI? Because I know AI is a great tool, but some people literally use it for copy and paste. So let's start off with talking about is there any type of guidelines for AI right now? Because right now, as we're recording it, it's in November of 2025. Obviously, this might change in the future, but right now it's kind of like the Wild West of AI.
That was going to be what I said. The Wild West is very true. There are currently 50 different lawsuits going against AI companies right now. And all of them, well, almost all of them seem to deal with the training on pre-existing copyrighted material for the most part. So you've got the Getty Images, you've got the Book Publishing Association, you've got the authors, individual authors suing over how things were trained. One of the AI companies, Anthropic, just agreed to a $1.5 billion settlement with a group of authors. So there's a lot going on in this space. What that typically means, though, is that there aren't a lot of answers yet, because the 50 lawsuits could theoretically have 50 different outcomes that would, muddy the waters even further. I think it's pretty clear to say the direction things seem to be going in is that the merely training on data that's out there, that's found on the internet, probably isn't copyright infringement. But if the trained system then outputs stuff that is substantially similar to an existing copyrighted work, that can be copyright infringement. And for authors, we can't hold the system responsible. The machine doesn't have a bank account that we can go after for damages. So it's the person who publishes the material, the company or the person who publishes the material. If it's substantially similar to a pre-existing copyrighted work, then that's going to be copyright infringement, regardless of how it sprung into existence. So that's point number one. Where are the legal ramifications? There's lots of them. First off, the systems sometimes hallucinate. So if you're doing factual based material, you need to fact check really carefully, because if you get something wrong, if it's about a person, you could be defaming that person with false information. There was a case a couple of years ago now involving an AI generated article. The journalist was using an AI to write an article that was about a particular person. Well, it turns out there was another person with the same name, and so the AI made the assumption about the other person, who also was convicted of a felony. So now we're talking about this person in Florida, and they're telling it like he's the person who was convicted of, in Colorado or whatever it was. So that's a big risk. You got to fact check the heck out of things, especially if you're using AI. And really just being good journalists in the way we do our writing, whether you're writing in journalist form or not, I think you have to think like one and make sure that you can back up everything that the AI puts out there for you.
One of the things I know one of my friends came across who he works for three of the big five publishing companies, and he does copy and proof editing.
Hmm.
Someone had written a book, and it wasn't through the big five, it was through somebody else. But
Yeah,
anyway, they had 8 quotes, and they clearly took all of them from AI, and none of them were correct. Like some of them were like the
yeah.
wrong author, some of them were like completely incorrect quotes altogether. So like if you are, I see people all the time and they're like, oh, I'm going to use AI to research. And I would tell
Hmm.
people that's like the completely wrong thing to do. Like, would you agree with that? Like, would you say don't, like, if you want to use AI to research, kind of use it like Wikipedia as a base, but then like actually go and verify the information, or just not use AI to research at all because it's a waste of your time?
Well, no, I think it's a valid tool. And if you think of it as a tool and not as a replacement for your own real mental effort, I think that's fine. And again, as a research tool, if you're doing research well, you're going to turn up stuff that turns out not to be accurate or not to be true, or that needs more explanation for the nuance to be understood, right? So go ahead, use the tool. And I love the tools. I use them a lot, but I try to make sure that either I already know what it's saying is true or I verify. And sometimes shouldn't even trust yourself on that. You may think you know, but oh, that quote sounds accurate. Well, yes and no, right? Um, you can by abbreviating a quote, you could change its meaning, or the system could just get it wrong and the wording isn't quite what the original person said, and so misquoting and misrepresenting things, especially if you're not representing it as a quote, can be dangerous. But I mean, what's the old
Saying,
the old Shakespearean thing about first kill all the lawyers, right? Well, that's only a
oh,
part of the sentence in the play, and I honestly I don't know what the rest of it is, but it's a very different meaning. It was something like, if you want to have an authoritarian state, first kill all the lawyers. I think it's from
right.
King Lear. Um, and so it changes the meaning dramatically to use just the shortened part of it. And the AIs are really good at capturing the concept, but not the precise wording. In fact, they're programmed to not duplicate the precise wording of an original quote. They're trained to paraphrase, essentially, so that they
Yeah.
aren't infringing copyrights left and right.
Right. I know one of the things AI does not do, it does not understand context, right? Like
Hmm.
you were saying, like, yeah, it will literally like spit out what has been fed into it. But then also
Yeah.
that's like the quality of like what's getting fed into it and how good is that quality that's categorized, right? That's getting fed into it along with the context. And the other thing that's working against us, and this is actually our own brains, because our own brains love to fill in stuff, like even
Hmm.
if we don't know, because our own brains want to be sure that we know. So even if we're not sure, our brain's like, yeah, that's it, that you got it, right? And so between the AI not being right and our own brains trying to fill in context, like there's a huge like space in there where we can get like into some really muddy waters, like legally speaking, if we publish that information.
Well, yeah, and also just how far we trust the systems to get things right. I mean, if the training set is nothing but nursery rhymes and fairy tales, then we're going to have AI thinking that geese lay golden eggs and beanstalks grow to where the giants live. you know,
Which would
and
be really cool.
yeah, right, exactly. But and the moon is made of green cheese, though that's another
Yes.
thing. So garbage in, garbage out is true of any computer system, really any data system at this point. So yeah, you have to trust that the data is either accurate or just voluminous enough to weed out the bits that aren't quite correct.
Got it. So what would you recommend for new authors and, repeat authors who are listening to this podcast? What would you recommend are safe ways to use AI as a tool, like when they're writing their book? Like what would you recommend, or like ways you can generally use it? Obviously, right, you want to use it
Mhm.
with care, but like what are
Yeah.
some ways you would suggest?
Well, I mean, if you're writing fiction, I think it can be a great tool for character development, um, building out what would this character do next, what kind of, how would this character respond when this other character does this, that, and the other thing. For nonfiction, I think you don't let it write the whole body of the text. You know, it's great to use it as an outlining tool, maybe as a structuring tool to sort of say, well, let's lay a little more of the hero's journey over this particular aspect of things, or let's, you know, adopt this kind of a framework for analyzing this part of the problem or something like that. But then you have to get in there and actually do your own words. Or the very tedious part of having it generate sentence by sentence rather than paragraph or page by page. So
So
that, yeah.
no, I know one of the things that some of my clients, well, not even some of my clients, but anyway, I know people have used AI for is like, they're like, okay, I like this paragraph, but there's something missing. Like I need to dress it up. And they wrote the original paragraph, but then they
Yeah.
put it in AI and say, can you please write this in a more blah, blah, blah style, right? So, I mean, I'm guessing that is obviously not copyright infringement because you're taking your own words and putting it in AI and asking it
Right.
to basically dress it up.
Yeah, I mean, again, using it as a proofreader, as a copy editor, those kinds of things, that's a reasonable, I think, a reasonable way to use these tools. Again, if its output is accurate and does what it's supposed to be doing. There's another component of this that we have to talk about, and that is that when you use an AI tool to create a work, you can't own it. You know, the copyright law has been very clear for about a century now that if the author of the work isn't a human, then it is not entitled to copyright protection.
Mm.
We have cases involving paintbrushes in being held by an elephant's trunk, and it paints a picture, and nobody can claim to own the image. Likewise, there was a case a few years ago involving monkey selfies, where the photographer left the camera out for these particular primates to do something, and they were taking selfies of themselves. They're kind of
I
funny
saw that
pictures.
video. It's
Yeah.
hysterical.
So the courts have been very clear that that's not entitled to copyright protection. So when the case comes along that a guy decided to have his AI system generate a full work, the Copyright Office said no, and he's a computer science guy. He has now petitioned the Supreme Court to review that case that said, no, he's not entitled to a copyright. So I don't think they're going to take the case, but if they do, it'll be in the next year, and we'll know more after that. That's the nature of the law. Things advance and proceed. Now, there have been a few situations where the human author has been able to show, well, I put enough of my own creative effort into this to at least be entitled to claim copyright in those elements that I contributed. So this one, in one case, it was actually an image called "A Single Slice of American Cheese" is the title of the image. And, you know, there was enough interim prompting to, you know, change this part to that color, change this shape to that, those kinds of things that really made it a human generated work assisted by a tool.
So, okay, great. Well, we're going to take a break right here, but I've got
Okay.
like 3 or 4 questions for you when you come back, Gordon.
Great.
This has been really great. Okay, my friends. So we're going to take a quick break, hang tight, and we're going to come back with Gordon and more on what is legal and what is not legal with AI.
Book a discovery call.
Yes, book a discovery call today. And remember to sign up for the next virtual writing retreat that is coming up probably in January. So we're here today with Gordon Firemark. He is the podcast lawyer. If you are in the entertainment industry and you are wondering if something is legal or you're not sure, you want a contract looked over, Gordon is your guy to call. So before the break, we were talking about AI and how it applies to publishing. So Gordon, I have a couple questions for you based on what we talked about in the first half. So one is Amazon, when you are publishing on Amazon, it has a checkbox where it says if you used AI to create your material on your book, you need to check that box. So what are the implications if someone does use AI, but they don't check that box on Amazon? And do you know, like, is that something that you're aware of?
Well, I mean, Amazon could certainly delist the book. They could say, you know, you violated their terms of service, that kind of thing. You could be accused of perpetrating some kind of a fraud if you don't disclose the nature of the work. I haven't actually read the Amazon terms of service, so I don't know exactly what they're getting at with that, but transparency and honesty is always important. And um, a lot of times when you make a deal with the publisher wants you to promise up and down that this is original work with you and that there's no infringement, no violation of anybody's rights. And honestly, if you've used AI to do it, you can't say with real certainty that that's the case. So that's your sort of risk in using the AI tools. We were talking about the ownership issues and how an author can't own an entirely AI generated work. If there's enough creative input from a human, then yes, you can. The other thing you need to know is when you use AI tools and you do go to or any source material really, and you go to register your copyrights, the law says you're supposed to disclaim anything that isn't original to you. So you're
Oh,
supposed to make sure that the registration the system understands that, where I quoted from this article, that's not mine. Where I used this other source material, or it's a translation from something, you have to disclose that there was source material and disclaim ownership of the non-original stuff. So, and if you don't do that, you can be accused of defrauding the Copyright Office, and it can invalidate your copyright altogether, and it could actually lead to damages and penalties if you try to sue somebody who infringed what you think is your work when in fact it wasn't really your work in the first place. So
okay. So that brings me to another question, because I see these advertisements pretty often, and it drives me crazy as a ghostwriter and a professional editor. But you see these advertisements where people come on and they're like, you can make seven figures, like having AI write your book, and then you publish it, and you can have AI write your book in like one day and publish it. But if you're having AI write your book, like you just said, you don't actually own that material. So if you don't own the copyright, then you can't legally make money off that book.
Well, you can make money if people will pay you for it. It's just a question of whether you have a basis for stopping somebody else from also circulating, distributing, copying, making derivatives based on that book that isn't yours in the first place, right? You can't claim copyright infringement, but as long as people will buy it, there's lots of examples of books that are in the public domain that somebody has republished in some form. And I'm thinking of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich as an example, right? Where anybody wants to, they can take it and put the text into a system and reformat things a little bit and publish their own edition, and that's perfectly legit. That's what the public domain is all about.
But if someone uses AI to like directly write a book, and they're not just using public domain, like they're just literally copying and pasting it, because that's what a lot of these, like, I see literally book programs that do this. They're like, oh, write your book. And so I wrote back to them and I said, well, isn't that copyright infringement if I take AI and use it to write my book? And it says, oh, well, it actually only writes the first paragraph of each chapter. So people are signing up for this thinking, oh, AI is going to write my book. I'm going to write a book in a day. I'm going to publish it, and then I'm going to make like 6 figures from it, which we all know does not work that way. But like even writing that first paragraph, obviously that's some AI involved, but then the person would still have to write the rest of the chapter. And if you don't know, right, like there's a whole implication of that. Anyway, so what is like, we talked earlier about like legal things you can use to write your book, but what is what was I going to say? I was going to check over the AI. What would you recommend for especially new authors who are using AI? Like, what should they avoid altogether? Because we talked about obviously not copying and pasting, but what are some other areas of like it might get into the gray of using AI for a tool that you would recommend new authors to stay away from because it could potentially like be harmful and or get involved in a legal lawsuit?
Well, a little bit of the old white guy talking here now. I'm just going to say, maybe I'm a little bit of a fuddy-duddy about this kind of a thing. My son is a high school senior and he's applying to colleges. He wants to be an author. He wants to be a novelist, and he doesn't sit down and write. So, as much as I encourage him, hey, keep a journal, you're going on this trip, write something down every day, those kinds of things. But the bottom line, my advice to authors is there is nothing for it but sitting down and writing, making it a habit. Stephen King, I think, says he has to write a certain number of words a day before he can do anything else. And that's just his discipline. The fact of it is, don't rely on the tool as a crutch. I mean, if you need it for an outline, if you need to make sure you're not missing a key point or something like that, then great. But sit down and write it yourself. And the act of writing and rereading and rewriting and reorganizing, that's what authorship really is. And yes, in the mainstream publishing world, you have editors, copy editors, story editors, all those kinds of folks coming into the equation. But ultimately, they're there just to guide the human author in what I think ought to be a very human process. In the nonfiction world, I would say maybe it's a little less critical, but I think what I will do for my next book is I will probably get an AI tool like ChatGPT. After all, it's called chat, right? I would have it prompt me and ask me questions that I then give my answers to, and then let it maybe digest and synthesize that stuff into a more structured format as a first draft of a book. But it's still my words coming out of my mouth, right? And the systems are really quite good at prompting you to elaborate on a point or explain something differently or those kinds of things. So I think
Interesting.
that's
So I have another question for you based on that.
yeah.
So one of the things that's really big in the publishing world now is some editors refuse to edit anything that is written with AI at all. And so if there was an editor who was like took someone's work and they edited it and they didn't know they used AI to write it, and that book got involved in a lawsuit, would that editor have any type of like responsibility in that lawsuit? Like, could they like get sued via like they edited a book someone gave them if they did not disclose it was written with AI?
Yeah, I mean, failing to disclose, if you're dealing with a publisher, you're dealing with a yeah, I mean that if they have made a policy decision not to do this, it could be very harmful to their reputation for something to come out that is not original with the author they're attributing it to. So you could actually be tarnishing their brand by duping them into publishing a book that isn't really yours.
So what about from like the freelance editor standpoint? So like I'm a freelance editor and I tell people like I'm not going to edit like copy that has been AI generated. And so and then that person's like, no, my copy's not AI generated, and I edit their copy, and then they end up getting sued down the line for using AI generated copy. That's copyright infringement. Would I, as a freelance editor, be sued as a secondary party on that because I participated in writing and publishing that book as an editor, or is that like more of a gray, murky area?
I don't think it's a very gray area. I mean, technically, yes, you could be considered a contributory infringer of some sort. I don't think that. I'm sure there is a precedent for it, but I don't think there's a lot of precedent for the idea of suing the editor who unknowingly edited AI created work or infringing work of any kind. If you recommended using a passage from another work and it turned out that that's where the infringement lawsuit came from, then yes, I think you could be held liable. When the author gets sued, they turn around and sue you, right? But no, I don't think there's too many scenarios where the lawyers are going to go after the editor who was really just sort of a gun for hire, unless there's evidence that they contributed the infringing material somehow themselves. So,
Got it.
yeah, I mean, publishers would be held liable, and if the editor's an employee of the publisher, well, then maybe they lose their job over it. But in the ordinary world, I wouldn't expect plaintiffs to go after editors. They're the editor's not making a name for themselves on the basis of this book that came out. That's the author. So
got it. So if someone is using AI as a tool, but they want to like double check that the content that they're using is not plagiarized, and they put it on a platform such as Grammarly, and you do the plagiarism checker, and you see like, oh, there's more than, because I know the standard in the industry is 5%, right? Because you can't, it's very hard to have anything at 0. So say like it comes up as 10% and you rewrite it in Grammarly so that your plagiarism checker says 5% or under. Now, is that like a really good way to make sure that your thing is not plagiarized? Or do you have another tool or another way that you like to check for plagiarism that's more, that's, I guess, a better tool to use?
I don't know what tool's good and what's not. I will say that one thing to be aware of when you're using a tool like Grammarly is that when you upload the work, you are training the AIs. You're giving it more of a data set. So that may be something we want to think twice about. On the other hand, we want these tools to help us make sure we're not ripping anybody off or whatever. The plagiarism thing. The thing about it is the law isn't as clear or specific, and there's debate about whether the law should always be crystal clear and black letter, bright lines between things. But the fact of it is, in copyright law, the standard for whether something is copyright infringement is substantial similarity. Well, what does that mean?
Right. So
It's
there's
usually in
definitely
the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
The jury.
So there's definitely some personal bias in there. It's not just black and white, like fact.
And sometimes what's substantially similar is not necessarily the exact wording, but the overall impression that something creates. Facts and ideas are not something that can be protected under copyright law, but stylistic things and the particulars of how we express something can be. So the real question is what's been copied protectable under copyright law in the first place? And if so, is this new thing substantially similar to that original? And then you get into, is there some excuse? Is it fair use or something like that? But yeah, I mean, it is a nuanced question. What's substantially similar? And different juries will come up with different answers.
And so I know there's been like a lot of things going on with AI, like what you can and can't do. Is there like a good website? Obviously, we can go to your website and check out some, because I know you've got great information on there. But is there any type of like government website or like official website where you can go and check out like what are the current laws on AI? Or no? I'm assuming no.
Well, again, we're not far enough into the litigation of these cases to have real answers definitively. We have some idea that the training may be considered fair use, that it's sort of the same way that humans train themselves to write is by reading other people's stuff and getting ideas and getting a feel for structures and things like that. There is a website that I sort of follow that sort of is tracking all these different lawsuits. The title of the website is ChatGPT is eating the world.com. And it's a great place to go just for sort of the latest updates on what's happening in these various cases. You probably need to have a little bit of legal training to really understand it fully, but I think that it'll get you started in the right direction. And
awesome. For people that are listening, I'll definitely throw that in the show notes. That's awesome. Okay. So Gordon, this has been fabulous to get a little more clarity on AI, because we can never be 100% clear, but this is really, really great start, I know, for a lot of people who are listening. So I know you have, people are going to want to know more about you and where they can find you. So I know you have 2 awesome online courses for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
One is the Easy Legal for Entrepreneurs. And then you also have one for podcasters. Obviously, people can sign up for both if they're an entrepreneur or podcaster.
Yeah.
And that's easylegalforpodcasters.com. So tell us about your 2 courses and who is a good fit for these.
Okay. Well, first of all, don't buy them both. If you are primarily an online content creator like a YouTuber or a podcaster, Easy Legal for Podcasters is the one to get. If you are more in the online course, digital business kind of space, then online Easy Legal for Entrepreneurs is the one. It's Easy Legal for Digital Entrepreneurs. All my stuff is available if you go to gordonfiremark.com. That's the easiest way to find that. My law firm blog and stuff is at firemark.com, but everything else is gordonfiremark.com. What these programs are is basically a system for getting protections in place to secure your intellectual property and your ownership of the whatever the enterprise is, who owns the show, if you've got a co-host, those kinds of issues. So systems for onboarding your talent, onboarding your team, for protecting your copyrights, your trademarks, your brands, and lots of forms and templates to help you do that the fast, easy, affordable way. Easy Legal for podcasters or entrepreneurs.
And we all know it is much easier and way less stressful and time consuming to front load all of those things and to find yourself in the back end of it in a legal battle.
Well, I'll say the biggest mistake that people make in the legal arena is is in business and in the law is waiting too long, thinking that they can wait. They don't need to worry about this. They're too small to be on the radar until they're not. And I have to ask, do you want to stay small, or if you want to grow, maybe getting these protections in place so you can sleep well at night and know by taking the big bold actions that drive real success, you're confident that you can do that because you've got the legal stuff squared away. So
that is awesome.
Yeah.
Great. No, well, thank you so much for coming on today, Gordon. I know my listeners got a lot of great value out of listening to this conversation today.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and it's always great to see you, Liquidy.
Always great to see you too. All right, my friends, remember to hit that follow or subscribe button so you get next week's show dropped straight into your podcast player. And remember, until next week, this is Lynn Liquidy reminding you to keep writing, keep dreaming, and keep creating. Your book is ready, waiting to be born. Okay, now we